we would like to, invite the founder of a company which is among top 10 best e-learning platforms which has proved. A company which has 58 million users a month, 60 million registered users, and which launched on October 2006. So I'm talking about Mr. Amit Ranjan, who is the founder of SlideShare. So, sir, the problem that we're going to discuss with you is everyone sitting here has an idea or has an idea at some point of time. What happens is that whenever they see that this is an idea and it's already there or it has a competition, so they kill the idea. So I wanted to ask you that why should one stick to the idea and try it rather than killing it? And how should one take a web-based startup from 0 users to million users?
So, how much time do I have for? So I think great question to ask, and especially in the context of startups. I think one of the things you might have read or been exposed to is this whole idea that ideas are just a multiplier. What really matters is execution. And if you are on the internet, I could actually show you. There's a brilliant article that was written in 2006, which talks about this and explains this in a beautiful way. That the idea itself, it's just a multiplier, and the multiplier goes from maybe -1 till about 20. And you could have -1 and 0 and 5 and 10 and 15 and 20. But what really matters is how you execute that idea. How do you give it a shape and a form and a life, and you bring it to a stage where there are other people who are willing to use it and vouch for the fact that this has legs. And that's the story of pretty much all the startups that you see on the web, including SlideShare. So we are not about having a great idea. YouTube was not the first video site. Google was not the first search engine. SlideShare incidentally was the first presentation site, but still I would say that that's hardly the reason why we were successful. There were so many other things, and I have a small presentation which I'll quickly skim through because it tells the story of SlideShare and what we did. It has also some other parts that I'll skip because I don't think it's probably relevant to this audience, but the core message and the core takeaway here for this audience from this presentation is just what I started with, is that ideas are just a multiplier. What matters is real execution. There are tons of people who have ideas, but who has the inner strength to stay with that idea, to continuously keep on working on it, to iterate on it. In all probabilities, the idea that you have initially when you start off, a lot of it is just going to change 6 months or 12 months or 2 years down the line. But yet you have to stick to what you are trying to do and constantly iterate and keep on innovating there. So if you could bring up that presentation that I have. So quick check. So how many people have known or used SlideShare? And how many people have uploaded a file on SlideShare? So the other people basically do copy paste, right? That's where you go to for your semester assignments, and am I right? Okay, great. So is this at all visible? So that, okay, fine. So I think you can move on. So I'll talk a little bit about SlideShare, and it's not to explain the product per se, because I don't think that's not required here, but it's to explain the industry of which SlideShare is a part of. And I think that's one of the messages that this audience can have from this talk, is that the internet is a beautiful place. I mean, and I believe this from the bottom of my heart. It's a place which gives equal opportunity to everyone. if you are a startup coming up with something, you actually have the opportunity to compete with the Googles, the Yahoos, and the Microsofts of the world, because you have access to the internet. So what I talk about SlideShare is actually in the context of explaining what the internet is, and I'll skip the second part because I think that's a little more business oriented. The third part is again the story around SlideShare, and I'd like to spend some time here because this is again, you'll see that the beginnings are very simple, very humble. It's just like you could place yourself in my position and you'll see that there's no difference there. And finally, I think I have a few learnings, and I think a couple of those learnings are important from a student perspective, and I'll speak about that. And I believe that we'll have some Q&A at the end. Is that correct, Yogesh? Yes. Okay. So SlideShare is the world's largest community for presentations, and we get about 60 million visitors. We are somewhere in the region of the 100 to 150 top sites in the world, and I would say that the main users of SlideShare there are essentially four buckets. There's business, there's technology, there's education, and there's non-profit. And one of the things to note about these segments is that the technology segment is actually what we call the early adopters. So whenever you talk of any of the new technology products, be it Dropbox, be it SlideShare, the community of people who first interact with the product and use it for the first time is actually early adopters. And they are essentially, early adopters are very internet savvy, they're very technology savvy, they're extremely good at trying out new ideas and giving you feedback. And so they are the first people who use any product, and that's the great thing about them. On the flip side, the problem is that they lose interest very quickly as well. So the way they come in very fast, they also leave you very fast. So what is likely to happen across all these destinations is that you'll see that after a few years, the early adopters have left. And you're starting to see that maybe with Facebook, where one of the statistics I read on Facebook a couple of months back is that the fastest growing segment on Facebook is actually the age group from 45 to 55. Now that's crazy, right? It's basically our parents who are on Facebook. They are the fastest growing segments. But that also means that the people who started Facebook, which is the college students, they have basically started abandoning Facebook for something else. But that is again, that's just a manifestation of what I said, is that technology is early adopters. You'll see the same thing on SlideShare. A lot of the people who use SlideShare in the early years, they don't use it now. And we try to kind of retain them, but we also realize that this is just the way the dynamics work. So you got to accept it, and you can move on. And the rest, I would say, is there's all kinds of uses of the platform that is happening apart from those four buckets. So there are people who are sharing paintings and sermons and photographs and book reviews and all kinds of stuff. Have you heard the term the long tail? Do people understand what the long tail means? Okay, no. So that's not good. So let me explain this. So the long tail of the internet is a term which was coined by Chris Anderson, who's one of the editors of Wired. He's a very respected guy on the internet. And what he's referring to is a long tail of the normal distribution curve. That's the reference. And what it means is that there's the classic Pareto 80-20 rule, is that the internet, the beauty of the internet is that it enables access. It enables access to the 20% as well, so that if it is available online, then anybody on the internet can actually use it and consume it and work on it and rebuild on top of it. And so that is what this thing, what you see here, is that there are 4 or 5 main buckets, which is the 80 part of the Pareto principle. But then there is the 20 part, which is kind of composed of millions and billions of people across the world using the platform in their own sweet way. And that is what is the long tail principle. You can go on. Right. So we are very strong in the education e-learning space. There are multiple surveys which track their usage, and SlideShare figures pretty much on on top there. Yeah. And now this is a slide I want to spend a few times on. In that, so one of the things to understand about sites like SlideShare and even YouTube and Instagram and Flickr is that they are essentially distribution platforms. At its core, that's what they do best. That's what SlideShare does best. And when I say distribution, so I'm making a distinction from creation itself. So on SlideShare, you by and large can't create content. And that is the same is true for YouTube as well. So by and large, there are some peripheral tools that YouTube or SlideShare have to help you create content, but the predominant focus of the platform is on distribution. It's on helping content spread across the web. And one of the things that you have to do when you are focusing on distribution is that you have to work with external partners. And we have worked with many of them. So we work with Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, WordPress, Google, because they all, for their services, they want SlideShare content, right? So on Twitter, on Facebook, they want their users to be consuming and sharing content, and SlideShare decks are one of the content. So that's why we have a partnership with them, and we spend a lot of time. So the way to understand is that a lot of content of SlideShare gets consumed on the parent site, but a lot of it also gets consumed on these places. And you can move on. So I think this also paved the way in our case for our acquisition by LinkedIn, because we were essentially a technology partner of LinkedIn since 2008. And then last year in 2012, they approached us and they asked us whether we would be interested in becoming a part of LinkedIn formally. And we felt that there was a lot of overlap between LinkedIn's users and SlideShare's users, because they are about professional users and we are about professional content. And that paved the way. That was the rationale for the acquisition of SlideShare by LinkedIn. So now, LinkedIn owns SlideShare. SlideShare is a part of LinkedIn. I am a LinkedIn employee, but we continue to do what we are doing with SlideShare. So I don't think our day jobs have changed. We are doing what we were doing pre-acquisition. It's just that we are now owned by LinkedIn. And I think the inference is that there will be more integrations between LinkedIn and SlideShare. I think we'll skip this. Right. So a couple of minutes on this. So essentially, while on one hand we are about presentations, but in a broader way, it's worth kind of taking a step back and trying to figure out what is it that we are trying to do. What is the big phenomenon on the web which attracts 60 million people? Why are they even coming to SlideShare? What is the key takeaway? And I think that the way I would describe that vision that we have is that we are trying to build and evolve a visual language for businesses. And when I say businesses, I mean for professionals essentially. And you will see that a lot of the content on SlideShare, especially the most popular content, is very visual. It has a lot of images and a little bit of text. And people so the best content on SlideShare is it uses images and a little bit of text to tell a story. So it's like essentially storytelling through images. And you might wonder why images, why the emphasis on the word images, because I think again this goes back to the internet and its essential character. See, the brilliant thing about the internet is that it is free, it is everywhere, it is welcoming, it gives you access, it has all the great things that you want to be able to use it. The problem with the internet is also the same thing actually. The problem is that there is just too much of content. So how do you kind of get what you want from the internet really quickly? How do you comprehend? How do you get a message? How do you understand something really quickly? That is also one of the biggest problems of the internet, is that there is just overabundance of content and experiences and just stimuli around you. And one of the things that there is research that shows this, and also people would relate to it, is that it is we've all heard this saying that a picture tells 1,000 words. Picture is like 1,000 words, right? So it's very easy to communicate via pictures. And that is what this kind of draws back to, is that if businesses want to communicate, they should be adopting more of a visual approach, and that's what we are trying to do with SlideShare in a broader sense. And yeah, you can skip this, I think. So you'll see that a lot of, people have resumes on LinkedIn. I think a lot of people have. Lots of people have visual resumes on SlideShare, and you'll see that it's kind of telling you the same story as the resume, but it's done in a more visual way. It's kind of weaving together into a persuasive, story. And there are visual essays and storytelling and keep on. I think we can skip it. Okay, so that's all about SlideShare, and as I said, key takeaways here from the internet's perspective is that the internet enables access. That's one of the big things that you've got to learn. B, the internet also has information overload. That's one of the big problems of the internet. The thing that I pointed out was, the long tail character is that the internet does this classic 80-20 thing for everyone. So, you have access at your control, and let's say you are thinking of a startup and you want to do something which is very specific. It's a very niche kind of an area. But the fact is that there could be people across the world who are interested in that niche thing that you are trying to do, and they will find you if you build the product and the application in a smart way. And if they find you, they will come and they will use you, and that can be the initial set of audiences that you have. And again, it goes back to the long tail principle. So I'll now talk a little bit about the story behind SlideShare, and I think one of the things that I always say, and I feel from the bottom of my heart, is that so startups are they're like fingerprint, and so fingerprint, why fingerprint? Because fingerprints, it never repeats. It's always different. Every person has a different one, and I think the same thing is true for startups. If you look at the stories behind startups, you'll realize that it's actually fingerprint. They are all different stories. They're all different people with different, backgrounds, different resources, trying to kind of come together and do something. And I think that itself, that should give you confidence. Is because what it tells you is that you are actually, your story or what you're thinking of, or if you're trying to start up yourself, you actually have the same opportunity as a SlideShare or a Google or anyone out there. Because the medium is welcoming. And as I said, everybody starts in a small way. Everybody is kind of, like fingerprint. Everybody is different. But yet there are some takeaways that, you might have when you listen to different stories. And, I'll talk a little bit about SlideShare. You'll hear a little bit about Jabong. And I think those are the common areas and those are the patterns that you would match. So what I would advise you is that these stories are different. At the same time, try to see the common patterns that you see across these different stories, and that is a key takeaway for you. So go back. Right. So quick confession here. So I am an accidental entrepreneur. I, unlike you guys who are sitting here and listening to somebody doing a startup, we never did all this in college. It was just something that happened in an accident way. But yes, I must say that once it happened, it completely changed me. So in that sense, entrepreneurship has been an absolutely life-changing experience, and this is the best thing that happened to me. It happened accidentally, but it is the best thing. And once it happened, there's no going back. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And a little bit about how we started. So my background, I'm a mechanical engineer from REC Jaipur, batch of 95. And then after my engineering, I worked in engineering manufacturing at Godrej for a couple of years. Then I did my MBA from FMS, passed out in 99. And post MBA, I was on the way to becoming what all MBAs become, which is to work in a big MNC and a big company. And my first job was with Asian Paints in their marketing and sales. I worked there for 4 years. And then I joined PepsiCo. This was again sales and marketing, and very, very typical MBA-ish kind of a career I was at. And so 2004 was when I said, okay, this is going well. I am doing well in life. I don't have anything to complain. But is this something that is going to excite me for the rest of my life? And the answer to that question was no. I think I don't think this is something that can drive me forever. And also, I think one of my personal thoughts were that while I had kind of done an MBA and I had kind of spent more than half a decade in the career, I still felt that at the bottom of my heart I was more of an engineer. The engineering instincts of building something and of creating something were kind of calling me back. And I said, okay, let me kind of see what I can do about it. And it so happened that I was here in Delhi working at PepsiCo, and my Rashmi, who's our CEO, and she's my elder sister. She comes from a background in psychology. She did masters, and then she went to the US for a PhD in cognitive psychology. She was teaching at the University of Berkeley as an associate professor. And she's married to this guy who's an American, and he's a software engineer. And so all three of us were, doing our respective things in our respective lives. We used to meet like brothers and sisters meet, once or twice a year and talk, and just the way, there was no family background, no plans, nothing whatsoever to herald, that something was going to happen. It just so happened that all three of us were not very happy. The common thing, the pattern that you see is that all three of us were not happy with what we were doing. In my case, as I said, I felt that, my engineering instincts were calling me back. In case of Rashmi, what had happened was that she was at probably the best lab for her area of work, but she felt that, academia is very slow. It just moves very slowly. And I'm sorry to make this sentence standing in an academic institution, but it just kind of typifies that. And Jonathan, who is a software engineer, he said, yeah, what, I'm ready for a startup any day. So all three of us, we left our respective jobs and we got together. Yep. And actually, what happened was, we immediately did not do SlideShare. This was 2004. We got together to build a user experience stroke design product. It's a research product. It's like a survey-based research product, and this was our first product. We built it. We had this was our, you can see the photograph here. I'll put it on the web. You can see this was like 200 square feet, which is like almost the size of this, this stage. That was our office. There were 5 engineers, and you can move on. Yeah, I don't think you can see this. This guy on the right there, he's a founding employee. He's now a technical architect. He's our oldest employee. He's a computer engineer, and so this is where we started off from. This was what I call, in Hindi we call it a barsati, right? I think people would know what a barsati is. Barsati is that room, the attic that you have at the top of your terrace. And I always say this, that so in Silicon Valley you hear about garage startups. Right. Now, the problem with India is that in India people don't have garages because people park their cars on the road. There are no garages. So unfortunately, you can't have garage startups. But you do have what I would describe as a Barsati startup. So I would put SlideShare in that category. And actually, I know a bunch of other Barsati startups as well. So you can move on. I think one of the things that happened was that we built the other product. It started doing very well. We started generating revenues. It seemed to be on the right direction. As a startup, we started generating revenues, and yet we again kind of this was 2006 now. So we started in 2004, 2 years, 2006, and again we kind of stepped back and we said, okay, this is going okay, but have we done the right thing? Is this really what excites us? Can we do this for, again, the rest of our lives? And I think the answer to that question was again a no. And if you just look at that situation, you'll realize how kind of stupid that was. I mean, in 2 years back, we all left our respective jobs. We said we'll do a startup. We got together, we did a startup, we built a product, we launched it started doing well, and then we say that, okay, this is good, but it still is not as exciting as what we thought. And I think the problem here with this product was that it was kind of very B2B. It lacked the sheer appeal of a B2C platform. And the internet was, this is 2005 and 6, the internet was just exploding at that time. So 2006 internet, if I were to describe you, was, YouTube started in 2005, Flickr was there, MySpace was there, Friendster was there, but there was no Facebook, no Twitter, at least they were not, as popular on the web. So we kind of missed the raw appeal of a consumer internet product. And that is something we didn't like in our first other startup. So we said, okay, let's look for other opportunities. And we organized a technical conference in Delhi. And what happened was, at the end of I don't think you can see this photo, move on. So this is, basically a photograph which shows a bunch of speakers. And what happened was that at the end of the day, when the event got over, all these speakers had their PowerPoint files, and there was a big audience, and those people from the audience wanted to get hold of these PowerPoint files, and the speakers wanted to distribute their PowerPoint in the audience. And because we were the organizers, we kind of found ourselves between those two groups of people. Because people were coming to us and saying, hey, take this CD, take this flash drive, I'll email it to you, can you help distribute this? So we kind of found ourselves between those two groups of people. At the same time, we noticed that people had taken videos and people had taken photographs and they had uploaded it to YouTube and to Flickr. And they said, okay, if you want to watch the video, just go and search using the tag and you'll find the video of this event. So we kind of, when the day got over, we started thinking, wait a minute, what is happening here? So we organized this event. You can argue that one of the key takeaways of that event was those PowerPoint files, but there was no way to distribute that. People were giving flash drives to us, but people took videos as well, and they put it on the internet, and people are searching and using it. So we could obviously see that there was the process was broken for PowerPoint. So we said, okay, let's start looking around. There was no solution on the web. There was no way of doing it on the web at that time. So that's where we got the idea. We said, okay, let's build a prototype. We took out a couple of engineers from our first product, we put it on this prototype, we spent 6 months, and we launched it. And this was, 2006, October. And thankfully for us, immediately after launch, we started getting lots and lots of users, because people were actually looking for this solution on the web for years. And so that gave us a lot of initial traction. I don't think you can see this photograph. This is our first set of engineers. So one thing I must point out is that we've always believed in the power of hiring young engineers, absolutely fresh, no background, never done this before. So apart from the 3 founders, there were 4 engineers, all of them were freshers, and they built SlideShare. So that's something, that's a key takeaway for you, that nobody who built SlideShare initially had even more than 1 year experience. They were that raw and they were that fresh. And if you just notice, and if you've read on the web, you'll realize that a lot of these companies essentially have been built by students. They've been built by people when they were in college or they are college dropouts, and because when you are in that phase, you are just more experimental. You're willing to take risks. You're willing to try out something that is on your own. And I think this goes back to what you are trying to say, is that how do you kind of stick to something? And I think the college time is the best time to do something like this. And look at we've all heard of Apple and Microsoft, and all of these are like formed by people who dropped out of college, but they were essentially they started when they were students. So our apart from the founders, the other teams was completely fresh engineers. And this was our office. It was a basement in Green Park in Delhi. This was purely and one of the things, just go there, next one. So this is something which is funny, and so what happened was our engineers, some of them were very crazy about Bollywood, and what they did was that they named our server after Bollywood heroines. So we had multiple servers, so the names were alphabetical. There was the server A was Aishwarya, and then B was Vipasha, and C was Selena, and D was something, and E and F. And what they did was that when the pages used to load, then in the footer, because pages are served by servers, so it used to say the name of the server that was serving. It used to say Ashwarya is serving you, then it's a Bipasha is serving you. And so every page load, if you go to the footer, you'll find this thing. Now, the funny thing that happened was very little of our traffic was from India. I mean, not even 5%, less than 5% was from India. So people in India actually still could relate to it because we had linked it to a blog post. People used to go and read it on the blog post and then they used to have a good laugh. But people across the world, they were like absolutely confused. They used to write support tickets to us. What does this word mean? What is Aishwarya? They never realized that this is a human name and obviously not a movie star or something. So that was something which was very funny. And I think we'll move on. Yeah, I think we're done. So now, so that's a story in a nutshell. I think the takeaways here again are very simple, very humble beginnings. An office which is 200 square feet. Idea coming from just a personal experience, and you're willing to start off something, but you persist with it. And as I said, the real trick here is execution. The ideas are really not worth anything. Now that we have a much bigger team, there are always these smart, bright engineers, product managers who are constantly coming to us. I want to build this. This is my idea. So our biggest message to them, the employees within the company now, is that, hey, you know what? You got an idea, that's fine. Tell me what you can execute. Show it to me in a real form. Show it to me how you would make it work. Because when you see something which is working, when you see something which is a prototype, which has motion, which has life in it, it's a completely different thing. And that's one of my recommendations to the folks here is that ideas don't matter, and ideas change as well. A lot of times, what you start off with, look at a company like Google, for example. Today, Google's biggest thing in the world is actually probably Android, right? But they started off with search, and they're huge in search. So what is happening here? I mean, you might even question that, how is it that people, how does the world reward people in a completely different area? Why do people use Android when they know that Google is about search? The answer to that question is that people use Google, they use it for a particular use case, and they think that this works so well. Google solves their problem, and they develop that confidence in Google. And then when Google tomorrow does something else, they say, hey, you know what, this company does well here, they're now doing this here, I might as well give them a shot here. And that's how these opportunities get transferred. And I think it's the same for a startup idea as well. So the recommendation I would have is that pick up something which is maybe small. It need not be a big idea. Don't think of what is the market size, what is the potential. I never go by all these things. You can change potential, you can change ideas, but pick up something and just focus on delivery. Focus on how well you can execute. That is the starting point. That is how these things originate, and use that to grow it. So I think I think this is a slightly business-oriented point. You can skip this. So this is I don't know whether you can see this. We've all heard of Darwin, right? And Darwin has this theory where he says that it's not the strongest, it's not the most intelligent of the species that survive, but it is the one which is the most adaptable to change that survives, right? I'm sure everybody has heard this. And I think this concept, this philosophy is equally applicable to how startups grow and they thrive. That it is not the strongest, it's not the people with the most resources, but it is people who have the most resilience to change and who are flexible that survives. And I think that's this is my personal experience as well, is that you should not be wedded to that I'm just going to do this. This is my idea. I'm fixated on this. I'll achieve this come what may. No, I think you should have an initial idea. You should work on this, but you should be ready to accept that some of those ideas may not work. And if and when you figure out when it doesn't work, you should be ready to change. And that is what this idea talks about, is that you should focus on being adaptable and flexible. And that gives you real inner strength. This next point actually is great for this audience. I'll just explain this. So how many people have heard of Guy Kawasaki? Right. So Guy Kawasaki is this guy he's pretty famous, in the Silicon Valley. He's essentially a marketing genius, I would say. Although he's done a bunch of other things as well. He's a venture capitalist. He's written books, but he's basically a marketing guy, and he's very deeply entrenched in Silicon Valley. So he has this funny little formula, he says, of valuing startups. So he says, add $500,000 to the value of to the valuation of a startup for every engineer that it has. And then he says in the second line is subtract $250,000 for every MBA that you have in the team. And that's he says, that's how I value early stage startups. And this is obviously kind of a funny way of putting it. And in my case, funny enough, at SlideShare, till 5 years, I was the only MBA. And everybody was an engineer, and I'm an engineer myself, so that's true. But it belies the fact. So I think what this point essentially means, and what he's trying to say, is that this is the technology space, and in the technology space, you better put technology first. Which kind of goes back to the industry, and if you just look around, the Googles, the Yahoos, the Facebooks of the world, you will realize that they are hardcore technology companies. Their origin comes from technology. The people who started them, the culture, the ambiance, everything was oriented towards technology. So if you want to build products in the technology space, you've got to kind of recognize and accept this fact. And I actually completely believe in it. Although as I explained in SlideShare founding team, I was actually the only non-technologist. But I completely believe in this as well, and I feel that if you're going to do internet products, then you have to embrace technology. And I think the corollary of this is that, let's say there are people who are not so technology oriented, but they want to start up. So recognizing this fact, and maybe you could deal with it, and maybe you could have founders who are technology based, or maybe you could hire people who are technology specialists. And but it's worth taking a step back and recognizing this. Next quick point is, I think last couple of slides I have. One is that what is the real power and the real weapon that a startup has, right? I think the real weapon that a startup has is that it is fast. It has speed. And what this point says is that you should, when you're doing a startup, you should optimize everything for speed and not for scalability. Don't worry about scalability when you're starting up, but worry about speed. Whether it is technology, whether it is product, whether it is HR, whether it is hiring, you have to do things fast. And sometimes when you will do things fast, you will fail. And it's fine to fail. But if you fail, what you have to ensure is that you don't just fall flat. You quickly get up and you start running again. And this is kind of the answer to one of the biggest questions that every technology startup across the world is asked. And if and when you get to that stage, and if you go to pitch to VCs, one question that everybody will ask you, okay, so what will happen if Google starts in your space, or they enter your space, or they start doing what you are doing? How would you survive? That's a very standard, textbook question that every VC asks a startup founder, especially in the product space. And I think the answer to that question is actually this slide. The answer is that it is true that the Googles and the Yahoos of the world have they have great engineers, probably far better than we'll ever have. They have great resources. They have everything going for them. What they don't have is speed. Because they are big and they have more structure, so a bigger structure needs more time to move. It needs more time to change. But we are small. A lot of times you are just a startup is 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 people. So imagine the speed at which you can turn things around. And that's your answer to the Googles of the world, is that, yes, we don't have the resources and even probably the capabilities that a Google has. But what I have is speed. And I will use that speed in a strategic way to my advantage. I know that a bigger organization cannot move at that speed. and I will turn this speed into an absolute weapon that I have, and I will use it in a strategic way. So takeaway here is, use speed as a competitive advantage. And last slide coming up. So I think, in the startup space, there's no denying the fact that this is hugely risky. 9 out of 10 startups will fail. And there is, millions and billions of dollars which is being pumped into different startups. Every day you go and read, if you read TechCrunch, that's one of the biggest publications, you'll see like so many products and services are launching every day, right? And the fact is that most of them will just fail. And it's not about that, the people who are starting them are any less smarter than you are. I mean, a lot of them are probably much smarter than I could ever be. It's not as if they don't have resources. But one of the key challenges in a startup is how do you deal with things like ambiguity, things like failure, things like how do you take risks. And I think that is something that actually separates a lot of the successful startups compared to those who don't. Is that it's just their ability to handle ambiguity and failure that kind of makes a huge difference. And I also want to kind of flag this up as a huge area of concern, or something that we should be aware of, especially for Indians. Because see, I mean, this is where Indians absolutely suck. Speaking from the bottom of my heart, and we are taught by the time we go to school, and we are just fighting this educational battle of getting good grades and being the first in class and being the first in college and getting into top educational institutions. So the entire DNA is telling you one thing. It's saying don't fail. On the other hand, if you want to succeed as a startup, startups are, a lot of it is just about managing failure. So there's an inherent contradiction here. There's a cultural contradiction here. And I find that this probably explains why India doesn't have a lot of product companies. Because we are averse to risk. We don't embrace it. We try to mitigate it. We try to kind of do things which take care of risk. But if you want to do something in the especially in the product space, this is an area that you got to be aware of and work. Hugely important, from an Indian context. So that's all I have, and I'm happy to.